I never thought delivering propane for a living would land me in the middle of a legal nightmare. But there I was on a Tuesday morning in Mesa, Arizona, watching a police cruiser pull up behind my truck with its lights flashing. My name is Ryan Beckman, and I'd been running propane deliveries for the past 8 years. The job was straightforward. Load up the truck at the depot, follow my route, fill tanks, collect payments, and head home. Nothing complicated. I knew every street in my territory like the back of my hand, from the commercial zones downtown to the sprawling residential neighborhoods that seemed to multiply every year. That particular morning started like any other, except I had a special first stop. Fire Station 12 on Dobson Road. Chief Martinez had called me personally the day before. "Ryan, we're running low and we've got a training exercise scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. I need you here first thing, no delays." "You got it, Chief. I'll be there at 7 sharp." That was the plan, and I intended to stick to it. Fire stations took priority in my book. These were the people who ran into burning buildings when everyone else ran out. If they needed propane for their equipment, their kitchen, or their generators, they got it first. No questions asked. I pulled my rig onto Dobson Road at 6:55, right on schedule. The sun was just starting to heat up the desert landscape, casting long shadows across the pavement. Fire Station 12 sat on a corner lot, a modern building with 3 bay doors and an American flag snapping in the morning breeze. I could see a couple of firefighters outside doing equipment checks on one of the engines. Then my phone rang. "Beckman Propane Services," I answered, using my standard greeting. "Yes, this is Patricia Winters from the Sunset Hills HOA board." The voice was sharp, clipped, and already annoyed. "I'm calling about your delivery route through our community." I pulled into the fire station parking lot and put the truck in park. "What about it?" "You're scheduled to deliver to several homes in our neighborhood today, and I need you to come here immediately. We have rules about commercial vehicle traffic, and you need to be briefed on them before you enter our community." I glanced at my watch. "Madam, I have a delivery to make to the fire station first. After that, I'll head to Sunset Hills. Should be there around 8:30. "That's unacceptable." Patricia's voice went up a notch. "Our HOA covenant requires all commercial vehicles to check in at the guardhouse before proceeding. You need to come here now before you make any other stops." I rubbed my forehead, feeling a headache starting to form. "Look, Mrs. Winters, I understand you have rules, but the fire station takes priority. They need propane for their operations. I'll be there as soon as I'm done here. If you don't come to the guardhouse first, I will be forced to call the authorities." "You want to call the cops because I'm delivering propane to a fire station first?" "I want to call the cops because you're refusing to follow our community guidelines. All commercial vehicles must check in. No exceptions." I took a deep breath. "Madam, I've been delivering to homes in Sunset Hills for 3 years. I've never had to check in at any guardhouse." "Well, the rules changed 6 months ago. If you'd been paying attention to the notices we sent to all service providers, you'd know that. Now, are you coming to the guardhouse or am I making a call?" Chief Martinez was walking toward my truck, probably wondering why I was still sitting in the cab instead of setting up the delivery. I didn't have time for this nonsense. "Do what you need to do, Mrs. Winters. I'm delivering to the fire station first. I'll be at Sunset Hills afterward." I hung up before she could respond. Chief Martinez tapped on my window. "Everything okay, Ryan?" I climbed out of the cab, shaking my head. "Yeah, just some HOA president threatening to call the cops on me because I'm here instead of checking in with her first." The chief's eyebrows went up. "Sunset Hills? How'd you know?" "Patricia Winters. She's called us 3 times in the past month complaining about noise from our sirens." Tried to tell us we couldn't run them between 9 p.m. and 7 a.m. He chuckled. I told her emergencies don't follow HOA quiet hours. Sounds about right. I walked to the back of my truck and started uncoiling the delivery hose. Well, she's all worked up because I didn't go to her guardhouse first. Let me guess. She said you have to check in before making any stops. Exactly. Chief Martinez crossed his arms, his expression turning serious. Ryan, when I called you yesterday, I told you I needed this delivery first thing. That means first, not second, not after you check in with some power-hungry HOA board member. First. That's what I told her. Good. Now let's get this tank filled. The delivery took about 20 minutes. While I was working, I kept expecting to see a police cruiser pull up, but the street stayed quiet. Maybe Patricia had been bluffing. Maybe she'd realized how ridiculous it would sound to call 911 because a propane truck was at a fire station. I should have known better. As I was coiling up the hose and securing it back on the truck, 2 Mesa PD vehicles pulled into the parking lot. Not one, but 2. 4 officers got out, hands resting casually on their belts as they approached. Someone call about a commercial vehicle violation, the first officer asked. He was younger, maybe late 20s, with his nameplate reading Officer Simmons. Chief Martinez stepped forward. I hope not, because this truck is here on my request, delivering essential supplies to this fire station. The second officer, older and with sergeant stripes, looked between the chief and my truck. We got a call from a Patricia Winters. She said a propane truck was blocking traffic and the driver was being hostile and refusing to comply with local ordinances. Blocking traffic. I gestured at the nearly empty parking lot. I'm parked in the fire station lot. I'm not blocking anything. Officer Simmons walked around my truck, confirming what was obvious to anyone with eyes. He's not blocking the road, Sarge. And the hostile part is complete garbage, Chief Martinez added. Ryan's been our propane supplier for 4 years. He's never been anything but professional. This is about an HOA power trip, nothing more. The sergeant pulled out a notepad. Sir, I'm going to need your side of the story. I explained the whole thing. Patricia's call, her demand that I come to the guardhouse first, my refusal because the fire station took priority. The sergeant listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting down notes. And you hung up on her? He asked when I finished. I told her I had to go because I had a delivery to make. Maybe I could have been more polite about it, but yeah, I ended the call. Officer Simmons was grinning now, trying to hide it but not quite succeeding. So let me get this straight. She wanted you to skip delivering to a fire station so you could check in at an HOA guardhouse first. That's the size of it, I confirmed. The sergeant closed his notepad. Sir, you're not violating any laws. You're parked on fire station property. You're conducting legitimate business, and you're not blocking traffic. Miss Winters may have HOA rules about commercial vehicles, but those rules apply to her community, not to the entire city of Mesa. That's what I figured, but I appreciate you confirming it. Chief Martinez wasn't done. Officers, I want to make something clear. I specifically requested this delivery for first thing this morning because we have a training exercise this afternoon that requires this propane. If Ryan had gone to that guardhouse first, it would have delayed him by at least half an hour, maybe more. That would have put our training schedule at risk. The sergeant nodded. I understand, Chief. We'll follow up with Miss Winters and explain the situation. Please do. And while you're at it, explain that calling 911 for a non-emergency is a waste of city resources. We've got real crimes to deal with. After the officers left, I finished securing my equipment and double-checked the fire station's tank. Everything looked good. Chief Martinez walked me back to my truck. Ryan, I meant what I said. You did the right thing coming here first. Don't let Patricia Winters or anyone else tell you different. Thanks, Chief. Though I have a feeling this isn't over. Probably not. People like her don't let things go easily. But you've got the law on your side, and more importantly, you've got common sense on your side. I climbed into my truck and pulled up my route on the tablet mounted to my dashboard. I had 6 more deliveries scheduled for today, 3 of them in Sunset Hills. Part of me wanted to skip that neighborhood entirely, call those customers and reschedule. But that wasn't fair to them. They needed propane, they'd scheduled their deliveries, and I wasn't going to let Patricia Winters dictate how I ran my business. The drive to Sunset Hills took 15 minutes. The neighborhood was one of those master-planned communities that had sprouted up all over Mesa in the past decade. Wide streets, Spanish-style homes with terracotta roofs, lots of decorative rock instead of grass, because this was the desert and lawns were for people who hated money and water. The entrance had a guardhouse that looked like it belonged at a military base rather than a residential neighborhood. I pulled up to the gate. A security guard stepped out, a young guy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Name and purpose?" he asked, sounding bored. "Ryan Beckman, Beckman Propane Services. I have 3 deliveries scheduled in the community." He checked his computer. "I don't see you on the approved vendor list. I've been delivering here for 3 years. I was on the list last week." "Well, you're not on it now." He handed me a clipboard with several pages attached. "You need to fill out these forms and get approval from the HOA board before you can enter." I looked at the forms. There were 6 pages of them, asking for everything from my business license number to my insurance information to a list of every vehicle I operated. At the bottom was a section about fees. Hold on. You're charging vendors to deliver to homes in your community. It's a $500 annual registration fee plus a $50 processing fee for the application. You're kidding. Sir, those are the rules. If you want to do business in Sunset Hills, you need to follow them. I pulled out my phone and called my first customer, a retired couple named the Hendersons who lived on Saguaro Lane. Mrs. Henderson answered on the second ring. "Hello, Mrs. Henderson. This is Ryan from Beckman Propane. I'm at your community gate, but apparently there's a new vendor registration process I need to go through. It might delay your delivery significantly." "Oh, for heaven's sake. Is this about Patricia's new rules?" "I'm guessing yes." "Ryan, those rules are ridiculous. Half the community is up in arms about them. She's charging vendors registration fees and pocketing the money for the HOA's administrative costs, which is just another way of saying she's using it to throw fancy parties for the board members. Well, right now I'm stuck at the gate. They won't let me in without filling out a bunch of paperwork and paying $550. I heard her yell to her husband in the background. "Tom, Patricia's blocking the propane delivery again." Then back to me. "Ryan, how much do you have in your tank?" "Excuse me." "Your propane tank, for your house. Are you low?" It was an odd question, but I answered anyway. "Yeah, actually, I'm at about 30%. I was planning to fill my own tank this weekend." "And where do you live?" "Over in Gilbert, the Eagle Ridge subdivision." "Is that in an HOA?" "No, thankfully, just regular city limits." Mrs. Henderson laughed. "Perfect. Tom and I are switching propane companies. We're canceling our account with you and signing up with— what's your main competitor? Valley Propane, probably." "But Mrs. Henderson, you don't have to do that." "Oh yes, we do. And I'm going to call everyone else in this neighborhood who uses your service and tell them to do the same thing. Then we're all going to sign up with Valley Propane, and when Patricia tries to block them at the gate, we'll have 50 households threatening to sue the HOA for preventing us from accessing essential services." I appreciate the thought, but that seems like a lot of trouble. Ryan, you've been our propane guy for 3 years. You're always on time, you're always professional, and you charged us a fair price. Patricia Winters has been president of this HOA for 6 months, and in that time she's raised our dues twice, implemented all these vendor fees that just increase costs for homeowners, and generally made everyone's life more difficult. This is the last straw. I can just fill out the forms and pay the fee, I said, though the words tasted bitter. Don't you dare. That just enables her behavior. No, we're going to fight this properly. In the meantime, we'll be fine. We have enough propane to last a few more weeks. You go deliver to your other customers. After I hung up, the guard was looking at me with sympathy. Rough day, huh? You have no idea. For what it's worth, I think the vendor fee thing is stupid too, but I just work here. I don't make the rules. I pulled away from the gate and checked my schedule. My other 3 deliveries in Sunset Hills were all residential customers I'd had for years. I called each one and got similar responses. They were angry at the HOA. They appreciated that I wasn't willing to just roll over and pay the fees, and they'd figure out alternative arrangements. The last call was to a guy named Robert Chen who had a pool heating system that ran on propane. He was furious. $550. Is she insane? Apparently not insane enough to stop. Ryan, I'm an attorney. I specialize in HOA law. And I can tell you right now that Patricia is on very shaky legal ground. An HOA can implement reasonable rules about commercial vehicles, but they can't prevent homeowners from accessing essential services. Propane is essential. You can't just cut people off from it. What about the vendor registration fee? That's trickier. Some HOAs have successfully implemented vendor fees, but they have to be reasonable, and they have to be genuinely used for administrative costs. $550 is excessive, especially if the money's not being properly accounted for. He paused. Do me a favor, don't pay that fee, don't register. Let Patricia make a stink about it, then we'll have grounds to challenge the whole system. You want me to be the test case. I want you to stand your ground, and I want you to document everything. Every phone call, every interaction at the gate, every time the HOA tries to prevent you from making deliveries. Keep records. I'm a propane delivery guy, not a paralegal. Then it's lucky you know a lawyer who works for free for people fighting ridiculous HOA rules. Ryan, I've been looking for a case like this. Patricia has overstepped badly and I want to nail her for it, but I need your help. I thought about it. Part of me just wanted to go back to delivering propane in peace, but another part of me was angry. I'd been doing this job for 8 years without any problems, and now some HOA president with too much time and power was trying to shake me down for fees and control my schedule. Okay, I said finally, I'll keep records, but I'm not making any promises beyond that. Fair enough, I'll be in touch. The rest of my route went smoothly. I had deliveries in Queen Creek, Apache Junction, and 2 more in Gilbert. By 3 in the afternoon, I was done and heading back to the depot to clock out and do my end-of-day paperwork. My boss, Sandra Chen, no relation to Robert. Apparently Chen was a common name, was waiting for me in the office. Sandra was in her 50s, tough as nails, and had built this business from nothing over the past 20 years. Had an interesting call today, she said as I walked in. From a Patricia Winters at the Sunset Hills HOA. Let me guess. She complained about me. She said you were rude, unprofessional, and that you refused to follow community guidelines. She demanded that I fire you and send a different driver to Sunset Hills. I started to defend myself, but Sandra held up a hand. Relax. I told her that you're one of my best drivers, and that if she had a problem with our service, she was welcome to tell her residents to find a different propane company. Then she said that I needed to pay a $550 vendor registration fee if we wanted to continue doing business in her community. "What you say?" I told her to pound sand. Well, I used more professional language, but that was the gist. Sandra leaned back in her chair. "Ryan, I've dealt with HOAs before. Some of them are reasonable. They have legitimate concerns about safety, about commercial vehicles blocking narrow streets, about scheduling so vendors don't all show up during peak traffic hours. That's fine. But this woman isn't interested in reasonable rules. She's interested in control and money." "Yeah, I got that impression. So here's what we're going to do. We're not paying her fees. We're not registering with her HOA. And we're going to continue serving any customer in Sunset Hills who wants our service. If they won't let you through the gate, we'll park outside the community and have customers meet you there with portable tanks. If Patricia Winters doesn't like it, she can take it up with the city." "You sure about this? I don't want to cause trouble for the business," Sandra laughed. "Ryan, I've been running this company for 20 years. I've dealt with competitors trying to undercut my prices, suppliers going out of business, equipment breaking down at the worst possible times, and customers who thought propane should be free. An HOA president on a power trip doesn't even crack the top 10 of my problems. We'll handle this." I spent the next hour writing up a detailed report of everything that had happened. Patricia's morning phone call, my delivery to the fire station, the police showing up, the situation at the guardhouse. Sandra read through it carefully, then made copies. "I'm going to send this to our lawyer," she said, "just so we have everything documented from the start. And Ryan, from now on, if Patricia or anyone from that HOA contacts you, be polite but firm. Don't argue, don't lose your temper, just state the facts and document everything." Robert Chen told me the same thing. He's a lawyer who lives in Sunset Hills. Apparently he specializes in HOA cases. "Robert Chen," Sandra's face lit up. "Tall guy, maybe 40, always wears those expensive suits." I didn't see him. We just talked on the phone. "I know him. He helped my sister fight her HOA a few years ago when they tried to fine her for painting her house the wrong shade of beige. He's good. If he's involved in this, Patricia Winters is going to have a very bad time." I went home that evening feeling a weird mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. I'd done the right thing by putting the fire station first, and I'd refused to be pushed around by an HOA on a power trip. But I also knew this wasn't over. People like Patricia Winters didn't back down easily. Sure enough, my phone rang at 7 the next morning. Unknown number. "Hello. Mr. Beckman, this is Patricia Winters. We need to talk." Her tone was different from yesterday, still authoritative but with an edge of fake friendliness that put me on guard. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Winters? I think we got off on the wrong foot yesterday." I was simply trying to enforce our community guidelines, and perhaps I came across a bit too strongly. "I'd like to invite you to our next HOA board meeting so we can discuss the vendor registration process and find a solution that works for everyone." "When's the meeting?" "Thursday evening at 7. We meet at the clubhouse in Sunset Hills." "And what exactly would we be discussing?" "Well, I understand you have concerns about the registration fee. Perhaps we can work out a payment plan or even a reduced rate for vendors who have been serving our community for several years." It was a trap. I could feel it. She wanted to get me in a room full of HOA board members where they could pressure me, outvote me, and twist everything I said. "Mrs. Winters, I appreciate the invitation, but I don't think there's much to discuss. I provide propane delivery services to individual homeowners who contract with my company. Those contracts are between me and them, not between me and the HOA. If your residents want my service, I'll provide it. If they don't, they're free to choose another vendor. But you can't provide service if you're not registered with our community. Actually, I can. I spoke with Mesa PD yesterday, and they confirmed that I'm not violating any city ordinances by delivering propane to residential customers. Your HOA rules don't override city law. Her friendly tone evaporated. Mr. Beckman, you're making this much more difficult than it needs to be. I'm just doing my job, Mrs. Winters. If you show up at that gate again without proper registration, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. Madam, if a homeowner in your community contracts with me for propane delivery and I show up to fulfill that contract, I'm not trespassing. I'm conducting legitimate business. But feel free to call the police. We've already been through this once and I'm happy to do it again. She hung up without another word. Robert Chen called me an hour later. I heard you had another conversation with Patricia. Word travels fast. She sent an email to every homeowner in Sunset Hills this morning, warning them that Beckman Propane Services is not an approved vendor and that anyone who uses your service is violating HOA covenants. Can she do that? She can send the email. Whether she can actually enforce it is another question. Ryan, I've been doing some digging into the HOA finances and it's interesting, very interesting. How so? The vendor registration program was implemented 6 months ago. According to the HOA's published budgets, they've collected over $40,000 in registration fees from various service providers, landscapers, pool cleaners, pest control companies, electricians, plumbers, you name it. That's a lot of money. It is. And here's the kicker. There's no detailed accounting of where that money went. The budget just lists it under administrative expenses. I've filed a formal request to review the detailed financial records, which I'm entitled to do as a homeowner. Patricia has 15 days to provide them. You think she's stealing the money? I think the money's not being spent on what it's supposed to be spent on. Whether that rises to the level of theft or embezzlement, I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. Thursday came faster than I expected. I had no intention of going to the HOA meeting, but Robert called me that afternoon and asked me to come as his guest. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to, he assured me. Just sit there and observe. I want Patricia to see that you're not intimidated, and I want the other board members to understand that this vendor registration issue has consequences beyond just collecting fees. Will Sandra mind? I already talked to her. She thinks it's a great idea. The Sunset Hills clubhouse was exactly what I expected. A sprawling building with a fake adobe exterior, lots of decorative ironwork, and professionally maintained desert landscaping. Inside, it had that generic upscale feel of a hotel conference room. Neutral colors, uncomfortable chairs, bland artwork on the walls. About 30 people were scattered around the room when Robert and I walked in. Most were homeowners, sitting in small groups and chatting quietly. At the front of the room, a long table was set up with 5 chairs behind it. 4 of the chairs were occupied by people I assumed were board members. The 5th chair, the one in the center, was empty. Patricia Winters made her entrance 5 minutes after 7, walking briskly to the center chair and sitting down without acknowledging anyone. She was exactly what I'd pictured from her voice. Mid-50s, perfectly styled blonde hair, expensive casual clothes that screamed, "I have money and I want you to know it." She had a leather portfolio in front of her and an expression that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. "This meeting will come to order," she announced, tapping a pen on the table. "First item on the agenda is approval of last month's minutes. All in favor?" The other 4 board members raised their hands automatically. No discussion, no questions. Motion passes. Next item, Landscaping proposals for the north entrance. We have 3 bids. Margaret, would you like to present? One of the other board members, a woman in her 60s with gray hair, started talking about different landscaping companies and their proposals. It was mind-numbingly boring, and I found my attention drifting until Robert nudged me. "Pay attention to the numbers," he whispered. Margaret was explaining that the 3 bids ranged from $12,000 to $18,000 for the landscaping work. Patricia immediately dismissed the lowest bid. "We're not choosing contractors based solely on price," she said. "Quality matters. I move that we accept the $18,000 bid from Desert Dreams Landscaping. All in favor?" Again, 4 hands went up immediately. "Wait," someone called from the audience. An older man stood up. "I'd like to ask some questions about that bid." Patricia's expression tightened. The time for questions was during the comment period. We haven't had a comment period yet. The comment period is at the end of the meeting after we've completed the agenda. That doesn't make any sense. How can we comment on decisions you've already made? Robert stood up. "Point of order, Madam President. According to Arizona HOA statutes, specifically Section 33-1804, homeowners must be given an opportunity to speak on any matter that involves expenditure of HOA funds before the board votes on that expenditure. You just voted to spend $18,000 without allowing comment." Patricia's face flushed. "This is a procedural matter, Robert. We've always done it this way." "That doesn't make it legal." The other board members were looking at each other uncomfortably. Finally, one of them, a younger guy who looked like he'd rather be watching TV, spoke up. "Patricia, maybe we should let people ask questions. It's not a big deal." "Fine." Patricia's voice was ice. "Mr. Henderson, you had a question." The older man, the same Henderson whose wife I'd talked to on the phone, stood again. "Yes, the lowest bid was $12,000. The highest bid is $18,000. That's a $6,000 difference. What specifically does the higher bid include that justifies that extra cost?" "Superior quality and reliability," Patricia said quickly. "That's not specific. I want to know what we're paying for." Robert stood again. "I'd also like to see all 3 bids. As homeowners, we're entitled to review any contracts before the board votes on them." "The bids are confidential business information," Patricia said. "No, they're not. They're HOA documents, and per Arizona law, homeowners have the right to inspect them. I'm formally requesting copies of all 3 landscaping bids." Patricia looked like she wanted to throw her portfolio at Robert's head. "Fine. You'll get your copies. In the meantime, I'm tabling the landscaping vote until next month." Next item on the agenda, vendor registration compliance. Here we go, I thought. Patricia pulled out a printed spreadsheet and put on reading glasses. Over the past 6 months, we've implemented a new vendor registration system to ensure that all commercial service providers working in Sunset Hills meet our community standards. To date, we have registered 37 vendors and collected over $40,000 in registration fees, which have been used for administrative costs associated with managing the program. "What administrative costs?" someone called out. "The costs of running the program," Patricia said vaguely. "Now, we currently have several vendors who are refusing to comply with registration requirements. Most notably, a propane delivery service called Beckman Propane Services has repeatedly violated our policies and shown complete disregard for community rules." I felt every head in the room turn to look at me. Patricia noticed too, her eyes narrowing. "Mr. Beckman, how nice of you to join us." I stood up. "I'm here as a guest of Robert Chen." "I'm sure you are. Would you like to explain to this board and to the homeowners why you refuse to follow our registration requirements?" Robert put a hand on my arm, but I was already talking. I'm happy to explain. I've been delivering propane to homes in Sunset Hills for 3 years without any problems. 6 months ago, your board implemented a new rule requiring all vendors to pay $550 for registration. That fee is excessive. It's not justified by any actual administrative costs, and it does nothing but increase prices for your residents who need propane service. I refuse to pay it on principle. So you admit you're not in compliance. I admit I'm not going to pay an unreasonable fee that serves no legitimate purpose. And before you ask, I've consulted with both the Mesa Police Department and legal counsel. I'm not violating any city ordinances or state laws by delivering propane to individual homeowners who contract with my company. Patricia's smile was sharp. But you are violating HOA covenants, which are legally binding, and homeowners who continue to use your service are also in violation. I've sent notices to 15 households who have used Beckman propane services in the past 6 months, warning them that they face fines of $250 per violation if they don't switch to an approved vendor. The room erupted. Multiple people started talking at once, most of them angry. Margaret, the gray-haired board member, looked shocked. Patricia, you didn't mention fining homeowners in our executive session. It's within the board's authority to enforce covenants, Patricia said. By fining people for getting propane deliveries. That's insane. This was Mrs. Henderson standing up and looking furious. Patricia, you're not some dictator. You can't just punish people for using the service providers they choose. Robert stood again. Madam President, I move that the board immediately suspend all vendor registration fees pending a full review of the program and its costs. I further move that any fines issued to homeowners for using non-registered vendors be rescinded. You can't make motions. You're not on the board. Actually, under Section 33-1804, any homeowner can make motions during open meetings. Board members then vote on those motions. Patricia looked at the other 4 board members. Do any of you second his ridiculous motion? No one spoke. They all looked uncomfortable, but none of them were willing to go against Patricia openly. Motion dies for lack of a second, Patricia said triumphantly. Now, unless there are any other interruptions, I'd like to move on to the next agenda item. Point of order, Robert said again. I've formally requested detailed financial records regarding the vendor registration program. You have 15 days to provide those records per Arizona statute. That deadline is Monday. If you fail to provide them, I'll file a complaint with the Arizona Department of Real Estate. The records will be available when they're ready. That's not how it works. You have a legal deadline. The meeting continued for another hour, covering topics like pool maintenance schedules and upcoming community events. I stopped paying attention, my mind still on Patricia's threat to fine homeowners who used my service. That was a new level of vindictive. When the meeting finally ended, Robert and I walked out to the parking lot together. A group of homeowners followed us, all of them wanting to talk. Mrs. Henderson got to us first. Ryan, I'm so sorry you had to sit through that. Patricia has gotten completely out of control. It's not your fault. No, but we voted her in as president. We thought she'd be good at organizing things, keeping the community running smoothly. Instead, she's turned into a tyrant. She looked at Robert. What are our options? A few things. First, I'm going to push on the financial records. If Patricia doesn't provide them by Monday, I'll file the complaint. The state takes HOA financial transparency very seriously. Second, we can start a petition to remove her as president. We'd need signatures from at least 20% of homeowners, and then we'd hold a special election. I can get 20% by tomorrow, Mr. Henderson said. Half the neighborhood is ready to revolt. Other homeowners chimed in with their own complaints about Patricia. She'd fined someone for having the wrong color doormat. She tried to ban solar panels on roofs because they were aesthetically unpleasing. She demanded that all homeowners use only approved contractors for any exterior work, and the approved contractors all happened to charge premium prices. The vendor registration thing was the last straw for a lot of people, one woman said. My pool guy had to pay the fee and he passed the cost on to me. Now my monthly pool maintenance costs $50 more than it used to. Same with my landscaper, someone else added, and my pest control service. Robert was taking notes on his phone. This is good. All of you document everything. Every fine, every fee increase, every interaction with Patricia or the board. We're going to need all of it. I drove home that night feeling like I'd stepped into something much bigger than a dispute over propane deliveries. This wasn't just about me or my business anymore. It was about an HOA president who'd let power go to her head and a community full of people who'd had enough. The weekend was quiet, which should have been my first warning that a storm was coming. Monday morning, my phone rang at 6:30. It was Robert. She didn't provide the records. What? The deadline was 5 p.m. today. I checked my email, my mailbox, nothing. Patricia didn't provide the financial records. So now what? Now I file the complaint with the state. And Ryan, I'm going to need your help with something. How many vendors do you know who have paid Patricia's registration fee? A few. I talk to other service guys when we're out on routes. Why? Because I want to interview all of them. I want to know how much they paid when they paid it, whether they got any actual services for that money. Can you put me in touch with them? Sure, I'll make some calls. Over the next few days, I contacted every vendor I knew who worked in Sunset Hills. Pool maintenance guys, landscapers, pest control technicians, HVAC contractors, electricians, plumbers. All of them had the same story. Patricia had sent them official-looking letters on HOA letterhead, demanding registration and payment of fees. Most had paid because they didn't want to lose business in the neighborhood. None of them had received anything in return except a laminated card that said, "Approved Sunset Hills vendor." Robert compiled all the information into a detailed report. The total collected from vendors over 6 months was $42,600. The HOA's published budget showed that money under administrative expenses with no further detail. This is looking more and more like embezzlement, Robert told me on Wednesday. I filed the complaint with the state on Monday. I got a call back today. They're opening an investigation. How long does that take? Depends on what they find. Could be weeks, could be months. But in the meantime, things are going to get interesting. He wasn't kidding. That evening, I got a call from Sandra. Ryan, we just got served with a lawsuit. What? Patricia Winters, on behalf of the Sunset Hills HOA, is suing Beckman Propane Services for violation of community covenants, trespassing, and intentional interference with HOA business operations. They're asking for $50,000 in damages plus attorney fees. I sat down hard. Sandra, I'm so sorry. This is my fault. Don't be ridiculous. This is Patricia's fault for being a lunatic. I already called our lawyer. He's reviewing the lawsuit, but his initial take is that it's complete garbage. You can't sue a vendor for trespassing when they are on private property by invitation of the property owner, and the rest of it is just thrown in to make the lawsuit look more serious than it is. Still, $50,000. We're not paying it. We're going to fight this and we're going to win. But Ryan, I need you to be prepared. This could get messy before it gets better. She was right. Over the next 2 weeks, things escalated fast. Patricia sent threatening letters to every homeowner who'd used my service in the past year, demanding they pay fines and switch to approved vendors. Robert filed a counter-lawsuit on behalf of 15 homeowners, claiming the vendor registration program was illegal and the fines were unenforceable. The state investigation into HOA finances moved forward, with investigators requesting bank records and interviewing board members. And then someone leaked the story to the local news. I was sitting in my truck eating lunch when my phone started blowing up with calls from reporters. I ignored most of them, but finally answered one from a woman who identified herself as Tracy Wu from Channel 3 News. "Mr. Beckman, I understand you're in a dispute with an HOA over propane deliveries. That's a very simplified version, but yes. Would you be willing to do an interview? We're running a story tonight on HOA overreach, and your case is a perfect example." I hesitated. Part of me wanted nothing to do with TV news, but another part of me thought about all the homeowners who were being fined, about Sandra's business being sued, about the principle of the thing. "Yes. I'll do the interview." They sent a crew to the fire station. Chief Martinez had agreed to be interviewed too, explaining how Patricia's vendor registration requirements could have delayed emergency equipment maintenance. The story aired that night at 6, and it was better than I'd hoped. Tracy Wu had done her homework, digging into Patricia's background and finding that she'd been involved in similar disputes at her previous HOA in Scottsdale. Patricia Winters has a history of aggressive enforcement of HOA rules, Tracy said in her stand-up. At her previous community, she was nearly recalled as president after trying to fine homeowners for holiday decorations. Now, homeowners in Sunset Hills say history is repeating itself. The story included interviews with several Sunset Hills residents, all of them complaining about Patricia's leadership. It showed Robert's lawsuit, and it featured Sandra defending her business and her employee. "Ryan Beckman is an exemplary driver," Sandra said on camera. "He's been with our company for 8 years. He's never had a safety violation, never had a customer complaint, and he always puts service first. This lawsuit is baseless, and we're going to fight it vigorously." After the story aired, my phone exploded again. This time it was customers calling to express support, other vendors wanting to know if they could join Robert's lawsuit, and reporters from other stations wanting follow-up interviews. Patricia apparently didn't handle the attention well. The next day, she called an emergency HOA meeting to address what she called false and defamatory news reports. Robert made sure I was there. The clubhouse was packed. Every seat was taken, with people standing along the walls and in the back. There must have been over 100 homeowners present, and the mood was angry. Patricia gavelled the meeting to order. "I've called this emergency session to address the recent media circus surrounding our vendor registration program. The news story that aired last night was full of inaccuracies and misrepresentations. I want to set the record straight." "Then where's the financial records?" someone shouted. "The records are being prepared and will be available shortly. It's been 2 weeks. The law says 15 days. Patricia's face flushed. There were complications with compiling the information. Robert stood up. "Madam President, I'm formally notifying this board that the Arizona Department of Real Estate has opened an investigation into HOA finances and the vendor registration program. As part of that investigation, they've subpoenaed all financial records, so the homeowners here tonight will see those records whether you want them to or not." The room erupted in talking. Patricia banged her gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. "This is exactly the kind of grandstanding I'm talking about," she yelled. "Robert Chen has been undermining this board for months, filing frivolous complaints and lawsuits, spreading rumors, and generally making it impossible for us to govern effectively. Maybe because you're not governing effectively, Mrs. Henderson called out. You're collecting money from vendors, fining homeowners for using basic services, and refusing to account for where the money goes. That's not governance, that's corruption. I will not tolerate these accusations. Then prove them wrong, Mr. Henderson said, standing next to his wife. Show us the records. Show us that the $42,000 in vendor fees went to legitimate expenses. Show us that you're not just padding your own pockets. How dare you suggest? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm asking for basic financial transparency, which is our right as homeowners. Margaret, the gray-haired board member, cleared her throat. Patricia, I think we need to address this directly. I've been on this board for 5 years, and I've never seen this level of distrust between the board and homeowners. Maybe we should consider suspending the vendor registration program until the state investigation is complete. Absolutely not. That program is generating essential revenue for community improvements. What improvements? Someone called out. Our pool is still broken. The streetlights in Section 3 don't work. The landscaping at the south entrance is dying. Where's all this money going? Patricia gathered her papers. I'm not going to sit here and be attacked. This meeting is adjourned. You can't just adjourn when people are asking legitimate questions, Robert protested. Watch me. Patricia stood up and walked out, leaving the other 4 board members sitting at the table looking shell-shocked. The crowd didn't leave. Instead, people started talking among themselves, sharing complaints and frustrations. Someone suggested starting a recall petition right there. Someone else offered to print copies. Within 20 minutes, people were signing. Robert pulled me aside. This is good. This is exactly what we need. Feels kind of chaotic. It is chaotic. But sometimes chaos is necessary to break through a corrupt system. Patricia thought she could control everything, but she pushed too hard and people are pushing back. The recall petition gathered signatures fast. Within a week, they had well over the 20% required to trigger a special election. Robert filed the petition with the HOA, and Patricia had no choice but to schedule the vote. Meanwhile, the state investigation was making progress. I knew because Tracy Wu called me again. Ryan, I'm working on a follow-up story. My sources tell me the state investigators have found significant discrepancies in HOA financial records. Can you confirm? I don't have inside information about the investigation. But you know Robert Chen, who filed the complaint. Has he told you anything? Tracy, I can't comment on an ongoing investigation. She sighed. Okay, fair enough. But off the record, are you surprised? Off the record? Not even a little bit. The follow-up story aired 2 days later. Tracy had somehow gotten hold of preliminary findings from the state investigation. The vendor registration program had collected $42,600. Of that, only $8,000 could be accounted for in legitimate expenses. Printing registration cards, postage, some minor software to track vendors. The remaining $34,600 was listed in the budget under vague categories like consulting fees and administrative overhead. But here's where it got interesting. Tracy had tracked down the consulting company that supposedly received $20,000 in fees. It was a shell company registered to Patricia's sister. The administrative overhead included multiple charges to restaurants, spas, and retail stores. It appears that Patricia Winters used HOA funds for personal expenses, Tracy reported. The state investigation is ongoing, but sources say criminal charges may be forthcoming. When that story aired, I was at home. My phone rang within minutes. It was Chief Martinez. Did you see the news? Just watched it. Ryan, I've been doing some checking. Remember when Patricia called the cops on you for delivering here first? Hard to forget. Turns out that wasn't the first time she's called 911 for non-emergencies. She's called 17 times in the past 6 months. Noise complaints about our sirens, complaints about our trucks blocking the road when they were parked legally, complaints about firefighters doing training exercises too early in the morning. The department has flagged her as a nuisance caller. 17 times. Yep, and it's not just us. She's called about landscaping crews, mail carriers, delivery drivers, you name it. Mesa PD is considering charging her with misuse of emergency services. Everything was coming to a head. The recall election was scheduled for the following Thursday. Criminal investigators were digging into Patricia's finances. Civil lawsuits were moving forward, and I was still just trying to deliver propane. I had a delivery scheduled for Friday morning at Fire Station 12. Chief Martinez had called personally to request it, same as before. "Just want to make sure you're coming here first," he said. "We've got another training exercise and I don't want any delays." "Chief, I always come to the fire station first." "Good. Because I heard through the grapevine that Patricia is planning something. Don't know what, but be careful." I arrived at the fire station at 7 a.m. sharp. Everything looked normal. I pulled into the parking lot, set up my equipment, and started the delivery. Chief Martinez came out to chat while I worked. "Big week ahead," he said. "You're telling me. How are you holding up? Honestly." "I just want this to be over. I want to go back to delivering propane without lawyers and news cameras and HOA drama." "I get that. But you did the right thing, Ryan. You stood up to a bully and you didn't back down when she tried to intimidate you. That takes guts. Or stupidity." "Sometimes I'm not sure which." Chief Martinez laughed. "Little of both, probably." I was finishing up the delivery when 2 cars pulled into the parking lot. One was a Mesa PD cruiser. The other was an unmarked sedan. 4 people got out. 2 uniformed officers and 2 people in plain clothes who had "detective" written all over them. My first thought was that Patricia had called the cops again. But then I saw that the detectives were heading for the unmarked car's trunk, pulling out evidence boxes. One of the uniformed officers walked over to us. "Chief Martinez, we're looking for Patricia Winters. We have a warrant for her arrest." Chief Martinez's eyebrows went up. "She's not here. Have you tried her home? That's our next stop. We were told she sometimes shows up here to harass you guys." "She does, but not this morning." "What's the charge?" "Theft, fraudulent schemes, and misuse of HOA funds." The state investigation wrapped up yesterday. They turned their findings over to the county attorney, who filed charges this morning. I felt a surge of satisfaction mixed with disbelief. It was really happening. Patricia was actually being arrested. "If she shows up here, I'll give you a call," Chief Martinez said. The officers left. I finished securing my equipment and closed up the truck. Chief Martinez was grinning. "Justice, Ryan. That's what justice looks like. I'll believe it when she's actually in handcuffs. Won't be long now." I had 3 more deliveries that morning, none of them in Sunset Hills. I'd lost all my customers there after Patricia's campaign against me, though several of them had promised to switch back once the recall election happened and new leadership took over. Around noon, my phone rang. It was Robert. They arrested her. I heard. Cops were at the fire station this morning looking for her. She's being arraigned this afternoon. The charges are serious, Ryan. Theft over $25,000 is a felony. She's looking at prison time if convicted. What about the recall election? Still happening. Even if Patricia resigns or is removed due to the criminal charges, we need new board members. The election will determine who takes over. But between you and me, I think Patricia's done. Even if she somehow beats the criminal charges, The HOA community has turned against her completely. The recall election happened the following Thursday. Roberts said turnout was massive, with over 80% of homeowners voting. Patricia was removed as president by a margin of 92%. 3 new board members were elected, all of them running on platforms of financial transparency and eliminating the vendor registration program. One of the new board members was Mrs. Henderson. She called me the day after the election. "Ryan, I wanted you to know that the new board's first order of business is rescinding all vendor registration requirements and refunding the fees. Any vendor who paid will get their money back." "That's great news." "It is, and I want to apologize personally for everything you went through. You shouldn't have had to fight this hard just to do your job." "I appreciate that, Mrs. Henderson. I also want to tell you that we're planning a community event next month, a barbecue at the clubhouse. We'd like you to come as our guest of honor." You stood up for what was right when it would have been easier to just pay the fee and move on. That takes character. "I'm not a hero, Mrs. Henderson. I just didn't want to pay an unreasonable fee." "Maybe so, but you became a symbol for everyone who was frustrated with Patricia's leadership. You gave people the courage to fight back. That matters." The criminal case against Patricia moved slowly through the court system, as these things do. She was released on bail and immediately resigned from the HOA board. Her lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the county attorney wasn't budging. The evidence was too strong, and there was too much public attention on the case. Tracy Wu did a final story on the case 6 months later. By then, Patricia had pleaded guilty to theft and fraudulent schemes in exchange for a reduced sentence. She got 3 years in prison, with the possibility of early release if she paid full restitution to the HOA and completed community service. The Sunset Hills HOA case serves as a cautionary tale about what happens when power goes unchecked, Tracy reported. Patricia Winters went from HOA president to convicted felon in less than a year. Meanwhile, the community she once controlled is rebuilding under new leadership, focused on transparency and serving homeowners rather than ruling over them. The story included an update on me and my business. Sandra had hired 2 new drivers to handle increased demand. Apparently, all the news coverage had been good for business. People liked the idea of supporting a company that stood up to HOA overreach. I was back to my regular routine, loading the truck, following my route, filling tanks, collecting payments. But things were different now. I developed relationships with customers beyond just business transactions. People recognized me from the news stories and would stop to chat. Other vendors would share their own HOA horror stories and thank me for fighting back. And Fire Station 12 remained my first stop on certain routes. Chief Martinez always made a point of coming out to say hello, and we'd become genuine friends. About a year after everything started, I had a delivery scheduled at the fire station early on a Tuesday morning. As I was finishing up, Chief Martinez walked over with a plaque. "The department wants you to have this," he said, handing it to me. I read the inscription, "Presented to Ryan Beckman in recognition of his dedication to serving our community and his unwavering commitment to doing the right thing, even when faced with adversity." "Chief, this is too much." "No, it's exactly enough. Ryan, you could have caved to Patricia's demands. You could have paid the fee, registered with the HOA, and avoided all the drama. But you didn't. You stood your ground because you knew you were right. That's the kind of integrity we respect." I mounted the plaque in my truck where I could see it every day. It became a reminder that sometimes the hardest path is the right path. The Sunset Hills HOA thrived under new leadership. Mrs. Henderson served as president for 2 years before stepping down, satisfied that she'd helped restore trust between the board and homeowners. The vendor registration program was permanently eliminated. Fees were refunded. Financial records were published quarterly and available to any homeowner who wanted to review them. Robert Chen continued practicing HOA law, and his reputation as the guy who took down a corrupt HOA president brought him more clients than he could handle. He'd occasionally call me when he needed someone to testify about HOA overreach in other cases. I was happy to help. Sandra's business continued growing. She eventually bought 2 more trucks and hired a total of 5 drivers. We became one of the premier propane services in the greater Phoenix area, and Sandra credited the publicity from the Patricia Winters case with putting us on the map. As for me, I remained just a propane delivery guy. I showed up on time, did my job well, and treated customers with respect. I delivered to fire stations first when they needed priority service, because that was the right thing to do. I refused to be pushed around by unreasonable rules, because that was also the right thing to do. Sometimes people ask me if I regret the whole experience. Fighting with the HOA, dealing with lawsuits, getting dragged through the news. My answer is always the same: no. Because that experience taught me something important about standing up for principles, even when it's difficult. It taught me that ordinary people can fight back against petty tyrants and win. And it taught me that communities are stronger when people work together against injustice. The morning sun had fully risen over Mesa, casting sharp shadows across Fire Station 12's parking lot. I coiled up the last section of delivery hose and secured it to my truck. Another successful delivery, another day of doing the job I loved without interference from power-hungry HOA presidents. Chief Martinez waved as I climbed into the cab. "See you next month, Ryan." "You got it, Chief." Same time, same place. And Ryan, keep fighting the good fight. I gave him a thumbs up and pulled out of the parking lot, heading toward my next delivery. The road stretched out ahead of me, familiar and welcoming. I had propane to deliver, customers to serve, and a business to run. No HOA rules, no vendor registration fees, no Patricia Winters trying to control my schedule, just me, my truck, and the open road. Exactly the way it should be.